Family, glad to be back with you for another Thursday night book club. Hope you've been having a fantabulous week. It's been pretty good for me. Oh shoot. Yeah, you see how late Facebook is? It is so behind. You dig? Which is wild. Again, I hope you've been having a fantastic week. If this is your first time here, I appreciate you joining us. This Soul Swami Live, where we discuss all things healing. Thursday night is our book club night, which is a spin-off of our Tuesday night show. Thursday night book club is for an intention for us to be able to reconnect to the youth in us, the child in us, because most children like to be read to, and learn a little bit more about different books and different cultures and a little bit of everything. So you can catch us every Tuesday and Thursday on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and I'm sometime on Instagram, but we got Instagram back tonight. Sometimes joining on Instagram can be a little difficult depending on what phone you're using. It's just a mess. It can be a mess. It's not a mess. It can be. So sometimes you can catch us on Instagram, like tonight. But guaranteed, we're on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook every Tuesday and Thursday, except for around holidays. The beginning of every show, we generally do some energy work, a little chakra cleansing. And this week we are on our heart. The heart is good for your love. It represents your compassion, your empathy, your kindness, and acceptance. How willing you are to accept and receive and all those things. The color for your heart is green, hence the green tint. The element is air. Whether it's the wind that blows outside or the air that you create in your own body. You are into crystals. You want to think emerald, jade, rose quartz, green calcite. And if you're into essential oils, you want to think rose, jasmine, germanium, things like that. So to get us started, we generally start with a little sound healing. So I'm going to hit our bowl for a second. What's going on? Ooh. For our breathing exercise, we will do what I'm thinking. 444. And that's what my spirit say. So all you have to do is just focus on your breath. And I'll keep the count for you. If you are unfamiliar with 444, it is you breathe in 4-4 count, you hold 4-4 count, and you breathe out, release 4-4 count. But again, all you have to do is just relax and focus in on your breathing and clearing your energy and thoughts, and I'll keep track of the count for you. We'll do it 3 times, family. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Breathe in 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold 4, 2, 3, 4. Release 4, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold 4, 2, 3, 4. Release 4, 2, 3, 4. Last time, family. Breathe in 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold 4, 2, 3, 4. Release 4, 2, 3, 4. For our visualization, it'll be simple. Imagine yourself standing in a place that resonates with your spirit. And it's a space that allows you to feel the winds of change blowing across your whole body, your face, your chest, whether it be an open field, whether it be desert, sand, storms, any place that resonates with your spirit and allows you to feel a gentle breeze. And I want you to take your hand and place it on your heart. And while you relax and feel that breeze, I want you to also pay attention to how powerful your touch is with your hand over your heart, and repeat these affirmations after me. I love myself and others. I deserve to be loved. I forgive others easily. My heart is fully open, loving, and pure. I follow the voice of my heart. I love myself and others. I deserve to be loved. I forgive others easily. My heart is fully open, loving, and pure. And I follow the voice of my heart. Side note, we're gonna jump on this book, but interesting. One of my guilty pleasures online is Kendra G Single Show. And before I started with this show, it was a little clip where she had just posted, and a young lady making North Carolina look bad, talking about a man that makes $70,000 is not enough for her because she likes to eat healthy. And you can't buy healthy food with $70,000. But then she goes on to say, this is $70,000 a person, a single individual with no children can't afford to buy healthy food if they make $70,000 a year. The thing that I found was kind of interesting in that is, she says she shops at Costco, and she always spends $250, $300 for herself, which is very much plausible at Costco. But Costco is bulk shopping. And if you really do like to eat healthy, there are other options. You can begin to grow. There's farmer markets. There's weekly sales. There's a bunch of different ways that you can afford to eat healthy. As a matter of fact, cook. Eat healthy. And you make $70,000 a year. I think a lot of people don't know how to shop, food shop, right? And we're not talking about in the space of access, food deserts. But I remember when I was a kid, this is one benefit, man, that I learned. And I used to hate it as a kid. But I map my shopping out now a little bit different based on that. When I was a kid, I used to go shopping with my mama all the time. And my mama was one of those people that she will go to every grocery store to go grocery shopping to save the money. So she'll pick up something here, pick up something there, pick up something here, pick up something there, and it worked. So now that I'm an adult and I do my shopping, I don't go as many places as she did, but I definitely pay attention to the sales, and I buy smart, and I definitely go to more than one place. Like I buy my grapes from Lidl. They always got the best prices on grapes. Generally, they got some good prices on fruit sometimes, but they don't have a good selection. But I do like their grapes when I'm juicing. I love Publix. Publix buy one, get one free. It's off the hook all the time. Even Harris Teeter will wild out sometimes. We're like, buy one, get 3 free or something like that. But you can definitely afford to eat healthy on $70,000. But I actually did comment on that, and people are replying to my comment. So I just had to see. So we are reading Lucretia and the Kroons by Victor Lavalle. We just kind of started it last week too, cause wait a minute, ain't no way. Maybe I forgot his books be short, so we might be able to knock this out. So far we just met Lucretia, and she had a birthday party where the neighborhood girls weren't that friendly, and her friend, I don't know, I think her friend maybe have cancer or something, but her friend finally came back from the hospital, and she went to visit her friend. And of course, her friend was tired. So that's where we're at. We're waiting for the friend to come downstairs to visit her. Friend want to smoke cigarettes. Do hood rat things with my friends, like smoking with cigarettes. But she want to ride her bike. But we had a space where we're just waiting for the friend to come downstairs. I'm laughing because it said Lewis was only 22 but already going bald. Man, listen, I know a family like that. They get 20 years of hair. At 20, that thing start working backwards on me. He kept his hair cut low, trying to disguise the fact, a style that emphasized the perfect roundness of his skull. That round head was one of Lucci's favorite things about him. When she was younger, like 3 or 4, He would walk around. He would walk her around on his shoulders, and she'd slap the top of that big old head, and he didn't mind at all. Even now at 12, when she saw her brother, she still had the urge to give him a smack or two on the noggin, but she wouldn't dare do it because they didn't know each other like they used to. Sometimes she really missed him. One of the reasons she taped the Mets pennant to her bedroom door was so that Lewis would know if he passed it, that it was important to her, that he was still important to her. So she felt quietly pleased that Lewis wanted to sit and talk a little while. He waited for their mother. Before they sat down, Lucci rolled up the blanket and pillow she laid out for Sonny. "You know who put that bike together?" he said, pointing at it where it stood, kickstand out, right under the living room window. "You did," she said, rolling her eyes. She knew this because he told her on Christmas Eve when her mother had it wheeled in. Then he told her again on Christmas Day, in case she'd somehow forgotten overnight. "That's right," Lewis said. He scratched behind one ear, then looked over his shoulder. "So why don't you tell me where Mom is taking me today?" Lucci grinned, giving nothing away. "To lunch," she said. Lewis scratched his chin. "I don't believe it." He looked at her directly. He had small, intelligent eyes. When they were younger, he would basically stare at her until she admitted to a lie. He tried to do it now, but his power over her had diminished now that she was 12. "Lunch," she said again, and nothing more. Lewis nodded once, as if he understood this plan was fruitless. But then Lucci saw a new quality in his eyes. They flashed brightly. "Mom says you and Sonny are going to be here alone for the afternoon." Lucci crossed her arms. Where was Sonny anyway? It seemed like it had been more than a couple of minutes already. "We're old enough," Lucci said quickly, just in case Lewis wanted to cause trouble by convincing their mother the two girls shouldn't be left by themselves. What better way to get out of the suspicious lunch date than convince their mom that Lucci and Sonny needed a chaperone? Lewis put up one open hand. "Relax," he said. "I'm not trying to spoil your party." She almost believed him. She waited to see what he said next. He looked past her now out the window. "I'm just impressed that you guys aren't worried." "About what?" Lucci asked a bit defensively. She had been allowed to stay in the apartment alone since she was 7. Since Lewis moved out and Mom didn't get home from work till 6 o'clock, Lucci was in the apartment by herself all the time, and she'd yet to kill herself. "The Kroons," Lewis said quietly. "I'm impressed you're not worried about them." "What is a Kroon?" she asked. Lewis grinned, and immediately Lucci regretted asking. The glee on her brother's face suggested that Lewis was about to enjoy himself at her expense. "This fool, you're too young to remember what the 80s were like," Lewis began. This was true, considering that Lucci hadn't been born till 1992. "They call it the crack era. You know what crack is? A drug," she said, and wished she hadn't posed it as a question. Lewis shook his big round head. "Weed is a drug." He said, "Tobacco is a drug." Lucci's eyes went wide, and she looked down at her pocket. "It is?" But Lewis wasn't listening. "Crack was a plague," he said. "The whole country got hit by it in the 80s. Queens was no exception." Lewis looked at the ceiling as if he were watching images of the era scroll by up there. The people who smoked crack, the addicts, they were called crackheads. Man, were they rough. Crackheads didn't care about eating or sleeping. They didn't wash and they didn't change their clothes. Hell, they barely had any clothes because they were too busy selling everything they had just to buy more crack. What kind of story is this? You telling about the crack era? "So they were naked?" Lucci asked. She imagined the sidewalk below, the streets of Flushing, overrun by naked, unwashed men and women. In her imagination, they tackled any normal person who walked by and tore away everything. Purses, jewelry, cell phones. Did they have cell phones back then? Lucci didn't know enough ancient history to be sure. Valid. They were monsters, Lewis said, with some satisfaction. He spoke like a veteran recalling the war. We had a family of crackheads in this building, he said, trying to sound nonchalant because he seemed to know that would only scare her more. In our building, Lucci asked. Not just in our building, he said, right above us. Lucci reeled back with open horror. In Sonny's place? Lewis chuckled with satisfaction at the reaction. On the 6th floor, 6D. Why do you think everyone is so afraid of that place? The Kroons. That was the family name. Mother, father, 5 sons, and a daughter. Every single one was a crackhead. I never took the elevator when I was young because 1 or 2 of those Kroons would ride the elevator day and night just looking for a kid to get on the elevator alone. They robbed him for whatever he had. Sometimes they did worse. Now Lewis looking at Lucci directly. Lewis looked over his shoulder for their mother. She wished her mother would appear and make Lewis shut up. But she wouldn't let herself call out for help. She'd feel too much like a baby if she did, so she sat quietly. Lewis looked across the living room at the television, which was off. He was reflected in the dark screen, but the image was warped. His head was even bigger and lopsided and grotesque. Lucci could almost imagine that he was a Kroon now, a creature that had snuck into their living room. A whole family? Can you believe that? Every single one of them was smoked out. It was crazy. I'd seen them in the hallways or the lobby, and they had sores on their bodies and their faces because the crack made them sick. They didn't eat or drink. They smoked so much, it was like their bodies started rotting. I remember one brother, the oldest brother, he had a dent in his head, like a baseball like a basketball without enough air in it. And that dent kept getting deeper year after year. One time I saw him, I was going up the stairs and he was coming down, and half his skull was just gone. It was like a pit with some skin over it. I didn't know how he could even be alive. He tried to grab me. Lucci leaned forward. What did you do? I was on the 2nd floor landing of the stairs. I opened the stairwell door and ran out and went over to my friend Todd's place at 2B. I still remember. I stayed there until Mom got home from work. I wouldn't even leave Todd's place. Mom had to come get me. I was just a little younger than you. The early 80s were a weird time. I remember kids started disappearing all over the country. The news and parents said kids were getting snatched by guys in vans, but that wasn't it. Not in this neighborhood. It was the Kroons, stealing children up to their apartment. And once they got you there, that's it. Nobody leaves 6D. Why? Lucci whispered. They just, well, I don't know what they did to kids up there, but the smells were so bad. They must have been burning the bodies. Alexa, turn off living room lights. Why? Lucci asked. For what? I don't know why things like that happen to children, Lewis said quietly, but being young doesn't protect you. Horrors come for kids too. At that moment, Lewis stared into the distance and seemed truly sad for having to reveal the truth like that to his little sister. But they're gone now, Lucci said softly. I've never seen them. Lewis lost that sad look and returned to something more gleeful. He shook his head. The parents died. I remember that, but the others didn't. The super locked that apartment up tight one day, but the brothers and sisters are still in there. Why do you think nobody ever moved into 6D? They can't. That place still belongs to those things. The super was hoping to just starve them out, but it hasn't worked. The Kroons won't die. But what if they're just stuck in there? It doesn't matter, right? They're stuck. The super closed off the door, but they can still get out. How? Same as I used to do. Same as you probably still do. Lewis watched her to see if she'd figured it out. The window? Lucci asked. The window, Lewis confirmed. Just then, their mother walked into the living room, and Lewis got up from the couch. Lucci's mother said, we have to go or we'll miss our appointment. Appointment? Lewis asked. Reservation, their mother quickly corrected. This whole time, Lucci was stiff on the couch, her body locked with fear. Tell Sonny I said hello, her mother said. I hoped I'd get to see her face before we left. Sonny's missing, Louis said, but the way he grinned showed that he was being theatrical. Their mother looked closely at Louis, then at Lucci, who hadn't moved from her spot on the couch. What have you been saying to her? Louis shrugged. We just been talking about the good old days. Their mother looked at the watch. Lucci, she said, but got no response. Lucretia. Finally, Lucci turned her head. We're leaving, she said. You're on your own. Chapter 4. The story of the Kroon seemed to float in the living room like a great gray cloud. So Lucci left the living room. She walked into her mother's bedroom and stopped before two wig-wearing mannequins. She had another idea, along with the bike ride, of what to do when Sonny arrived. 2 wigs for 2 girls who might enjoy a little dress-up. Lucci would save the nicer one, the date wig, for Sonny. She slipped the work wig off from his foam head and placed it gently on her scalp. She knew she should have waited for Sonny to do all this, and normally she would have, but Lucci's story had her feeling jumpy. She needed to do something just so she wouldn't be sitting around having nightmares about apartment 6D. She tucked one braid under that wig as best as she could, then the other. Did she look older now? Lucci turned to her right profile and her left. She dipped one shoulder and looked into the mirror with the most mature expression. The wig looked nice. And wouldn't it be even better with a little lipstick? Lucci found a small bag on the top dresser drawer where her mother kept her cosmetics. Unopened lipstick, eyeliner, foundation, a jar of cold cream. Lucci decided to be bold and she uncapped the lipstick. A red that wasn't too red, and she applied it lightly, like she'd often seen her mother do. Now she looked at herself again in the mirror, delighted at the sight. Forget the fact that she was 12 years old. She practically looked 15, maybe even 16. She stepped backwards from the dresser mirror, and the further she moved, the older she seemed to get. She found a pair of her mother's socks on the floor, rolled each into a ball, and tucked them into her sweater. Now she even had boobs. Her hand moved towards her pants pocket without her even willing to do it so. She had one of Sonny's cigarettes pinched between her 2 fingers and almost didn't realize how it gotten there. She was becoming someone else. Not Lucci, but Lucretia. Lucretia put the cigarettes between her lips and made a loud sucking sound, treating the cigarette more like a straw. The sound was embarrassing, but in the mirror across the room, the moves looked so elegant to her. Lucretia swiveled, her hips turning before her feet. Lucretia sashayed out the bedroom and into the kitchen. Lucretia spun the dial on the front burner of the oven, and flames whooshed when they rose. Lucretia batted her head from side to side as if a breeze were playing through her hair. Lucretia bent forward delicately and brought the tip of the cigarette to the flame. When it lit, Lucretia pulled on the other end, more gently this time, and the rolling paper flared. Suddenly, Lucretia thought she heard the front door unlock. Her mother was back. She turned off the burner and listened. Mom? Lucci waited. She held the lit cigarette behind her back. Louis? If it had been Sonny and her grandmother, they would have rung the bell. Still nothing. She shut her eyes and held her breath. No sounds. They weren't back. Maybe just the door of another apartment nearby open. She walked back into the bedroom. Where was Sonny, though? Lucretia stood in the same place, a few feet from the dresser mirror, and watched herself take a pull so deep, so expert. The smoke filled her mouth and her cheeks expanded. Then some of the smoke stuck down her throat, and boy, did it burn. Her eyes watered quickly, suddenly, and her mouth fell open, and she hacked inelegantly once, twice, 3 times. The cigarette fell out of Lucci's fingers and landed on the bedroom carpet, but she hardly noticed. She stooped forward and coughed violently. She was crying now, and her mouth filled with spit that tasted vile. She opened her mouth and choked out all the spit right onto the carpet. Then she kept heaving, and something came up from deep in her stomach. She hadn't eaten much for breakfast, too excited. So she vomited bile. Right there in her mother's bedroom, a puddle in the carpet. Nice. At least the vomit doused the cigarette. Lucci stepped back from the puddle and stood straight. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she no longer looked 16, just 12 again. Her face was flushed and lipstick had smeared down onto her chin. Her mother's wig had slipped so far forward it almost covered her eyes. Lucci squatted and fished for the rest of the cigarette out of the carpet. It would have to be flushed. She went to the bathroom, and when she was in there, she heard a wail of a siren coming down the block. It was loud. Not the police, not a fire truck. It was an ambulance. This wasn't so strange. Ambulances came down her block from time to time. There was a bunch of old people who lived in a building and the one across the street. Sometimes the ambulance was just passing through, headed towards emergency on another block. But the siren only got louder. The ambulance wasn't passing by. It had stopped outside. The sound was so loud now that Lucci shut the bathroom door as if it would keep it out, but it didn't. She flushed a cigarette to drown out the siren. She tried to think of which old person in the building might have called 911. Miss Kirkaloo? Miss Dodgkin? Who else might have called for it? The siren continued to wail so loudly. It was as if it had parked right in front of her window. Lucci flushed the toilet a second time, but nothing would shut that ambulance out. She stood in the bathroom wishing for something, anything that might distract her. It was right about then that she heard a new sound, something rattling. Earlier she was hoping for Sonny's knock at the front door, but this sound came from the kitchen window by the fire escape. Lucci walked into the kitchen to the sound of more rattling. Sunlight filtered in through the grill of the security gate. The gate had a waffle pattern, steel bars crisscrossing so tightly that an adult would have a hard time slipping more than 2 fingers through any of the spaces. This was a good design, meant to keep a burglar from getting his hands inside, but the close-set grill also made it hard to see through, to see out. So it wasn't until Lucci was standing right up to the security gate that she realized there was someone out on the fire escape. The person was much bigger than Sonny. It was a woman. At least that was Sonny's best guess, but no one she recognized, and she knew most of her neighbors in the building on sight. Lucci pressed one eye to the grill and looked through. The woman was crouched there by Lucci's window, pressing so close that Lucci could only make out the upper half of her face. The woman wasn't even looking in Lucci's apartment. She crouched out there right in front of Lucci's window, but her face was in the profile, looking away, maybe down at the ambulance still on the street. It was just then that Lucci realized the siren had stopped ringing, but she could still hear the heavy chugging engine of the thing double parked outside. Lucci closed her mouth and quieted her breathing. She kept her eye on the grill, but didn't know what else to do. Who was this woman? Lucci could see one ear, one eye, the curve of her bulbous nose, The woman's hair was short and dry looking. It was pulled back into a small ponytail. Her hair was almost the same color as her skin, both a deep gray, like the color of the cigarette ashes that had fallen to the carpet in Lucci's mother's room. The woman's ear looked tiny, misshapen. It took a moment before Lucci realized it was just that woman's earlobe had been torn off or fallen off a long time ago. The white of the woman's eyes looked pink. But for all this, somehow the worst part of this was that the woman wouldn't even turn her head and look into Lucci's window. She just kept staring down at the street as if it was almost normal thing in the world to stop to stoop in front of a stranger's fourth floor kitchen window. It was this, the calm of the woman, that unnerved Lucci. The fear was like an itch running up her scalp. What to do, what to do. My mother's in the other room, Lucci finally shouted through the grill. The woman didn't move. She stood in profile, only inches from the window. And the longer she stayed there, immobile, impassive, the more Lucci wanted to reach out and push her off the fire escape. Better she fall to the ground and break her back than to just keep squatting there, scaring the life out of Lucci. And my brother is here, Lucci added, less forcefully. Lucci had been watching the woman long enough to see the faint rise and fall of the woman's head as she breathed. Lucci went quiet again, and now she could hear the woman breathing too, even through the gate and the windows closed. It was a strange sound, like Sonny's breathing had been earlier, but there was something more to it. It was wet, like gurgling, each time the woman exhaled. When Lucci had a cold and her nose was clogged up, and she had to breathe through her mouth, it sounded like that. So maybe the woman was just sick. Maybe she needed help. Not that Lucci was about to open the gate and start offering assistance. She was 12, but she wasn't a dummy. Still, the thought that she might be sick, a sick woman, made Lucci feel a little less scared of her. Lucci hadn't realized she had one hand balled into a tight fist until she looked down. She relaxed it. Then she heard the rattling sound again. It kept on for 10 seconds, wood moving and glass shaking, then a little squawk. And that's when Lucci finally understood what was happening. The kitchen window was rising. The woman was opening Lucci's window. These old buildings weren't always in the best shape. After decades, many of their windows were loose in their frame. Lucci had seen Louis slip back into the apartment this way more than once when she was a young kid. His hands putting pressures on the edges of the glass, then just jiggling the window until it began to lift. It was one of the main reasons buildings like these needed security gates. But even the security gate didn't make Lucci feel safe right now. If this woman could so blatantly climb to her window, then pull the window up, who knew what else she could do? Maybe even the security gate wouldn't be much of a hurdle. Lucci would be defenseless. Lucci heard the squawking as it moved up an inch, 2 inches, but then it stopped. Now there was another sound. The woman out there grunted. A moment later, Lucci thought she saw a mouse pop up from the bottom of the security gate. She hopped back and gasped. She almost peed herself. But it wasn't a mouse. It was more than that. Something was wiggling right between the gaps in the gate. One long pointer finger poked its way to the kitchen. Lucci hissed as if it were a rat. She stood straight and stiffened. The long finger, a cadaverous-looking gray, as the woman's face wriggled and poked as if it were cleaning a clog in a drain. Lucci couldn't understand what the woman had planned. She couldn't squeeze her body through that hole. Could she? This couldn't really be happening. But then Louis' voice played in her ears, an unwelcome bit of wisdom. Being young doesn't protect you. Horrors come for kids too. Lucci didn't waste the time. She could grab a knife from the drawer by the kitchen sink. She could try to chop the woman's finger off if she kept sticking it through. If that didn't work, she could lock herself in the bathroom and call her mother, then the police, then the army. Lucci was so busy forming a plan that she didn't pay attention to the security gate. So it took a moment before she realized the finger had disappeared. Pulled back out, and now something blue was being stuffed through the small gap in the gate's grill work. It was a blue knit cap. Sonny's blue knit cap. Sonny's cap with the blue pom-poms. The whole thing was crammed through a small space, Finally, it fell to the kitchen floor with a faint ploop. Lucci stared at it. Almost felt like she was staring at one of Sonny's organs lying on the floor. My friend, Lucci thought. What did you do to my friend? Forget fear. Lucci couldn't control herself. She shook that gate with rage. But she lost her voice when she looked through the grill work again. The woman had turned her head and looked directly into the window. The woman locked eyes with Lucci. Now that she had Lucci's attention, the woman scooched backward on the fire escape. Lucci could see her more clearly from the shoulders up. Lucci now understood why the woman's breathing had been so strained, so strange. The woman's lower jaw was missing. She had a scalp on the forehead, 2 ears, 2 eyes, a nose and a cheek, and an upper lip, and the top row of teeth, but the bottom of her face was gone. No lower jaw, no tongue, as if it had all just rotted off. Lucci felt the urge to vomit again. Her own mouth hurt suddenly. It was because Lucci was clenching her jaw so tightly with disgust. The woman stayed on the fire escape, watching Lucci intently. Each time she exhaled, her throat pulsed with a faint wave of spit spilled from the gap between her neck and the roof of her mouth. The spit splattered down onto the dingy floral white nightdress she wore. The fabric on her chest showed so many spots that had been wet and dried. It looked like the woman had been wearing those clothes for decades, since the 80s maybe. Kroons, Lucci said quietly. Now Lucci even tasted the vomit in her mouth. Her nasal passages burned too, but she swallowed the vomit back down, which was disgusting. The woman out there didn't shift her gaze, and Lucci felt almost hypnotized. She couldn't look away. Was there a challenge or a threat in the stare? But there was a cap on the floor. Don't forget, Sonny's cap. Her friend. Her friend? Her friend. Where's Sonny? Lucci said, her face pressed up against the security gate. She wished she didn't sound so scared. The woman raised her hand, pointing up. Lucci knew what that meant. 6D, she whispered. The woman stood. Lucci could see even more of her. The nightdress came down to the woman's knees. It looked so old that it wondered how it still remained intact, as raggedy and as a mummy's wrappings. She wore cheap, very worn flip-flops. The woman, the Kroon, walked up and down the fire escape stairs slowly. Her slippers clapped against the bottoms of her feet as she climbed up to the 5th floor landing. In a few moments, Lucci couldn't see her anymore. Lucci listened to the sound of the slippers as the woman kept climbing. Back up to the 6th floor. Lucci didn't move. Couldn't move until the sound of the slippers was gone. Finally, she put the blue cap off the floor. She cradled it as if it was on Sonny's head. But Lucci didn't waste much time with that. She set the cap down on the kitchen table gently. Lewis said nobody ever left 6D, but she wasn't going to give up on Sonny just like that. She had to at least try to save her best friend. Chapter 5. Lucci unlatched the security gate and rolled it back. She opened the window and climbed out. She didn't even notice that she left Sonny's piece of still half-frozen cake, the Carvel flying saucer, sitting out on the plate. She was outside on the fire escape again, moving so quickly that she didn't even realize she still had on her mother's wig, and she still was on the 5th floor and happened to see herself reflected in the kitchen windows of Sonny's apartment. She saw herself and almost gasped. She looked crazy, but she didn't care. Then she realized the security gate had been opened, and she could see inside. Sonny's grandmother sat in the kitchen, in the seat Sonny had been using not even an hour before. Sonny's grandmother had no other name that Lucci was aware of. She's simply Sonny's grandmother. That's how Lucci addressed the woman whenever they met in the elevator or walked down Golden Street. And Sonny's grandmother seemed to recognize Lucci about half the time, maybe a little less. It was hard to say because the woman only ever seemed to wear one expression, the same expression, whether morning or night, cloudy or sunny days. Sonny's grandmother looked as though she was about to spit. The old woman's mouth was always closed, lips pursed tight, a slight frown always on her lips, as if she had considered any and all things known to the world and found every single one of them wanting. She was so small. She was a small woman with wide shoulders and an even wider back, though her legs were short and fantastically skinny. Was there any other way to say this? The woman looked very much in her face and in her figure like a toad, and Lucci seemed as unknowable. Lucci saw this woman now, sitting in the kitchen, in a chair right by the window, in Sonny's chair, but the old woman hadn't noticed her. This was because Sonny's grandmother was bent forward, her small, wide hands on her knee, and she was crying. At least she seemed to be crying. The posture was correct. Sonny's grandmother leaned so far forward that her head almost touched her thighs. Her head trembled and her shoulders shook. It was worse than crying. It was like the old woman's body was breaking down. Lucci didn't see any tears, but the old woman's whole face sagged with grief. The old woman sat alone in a chair that was still warm, and she was coming close to shattering. This, just as much as the evidence of the blue knit cap, was how Lucci truly became to believe that Sonny had been snatched by the Kroons. Maybe Sonny's grandmother had heard and believed the same rule as Lewis: nobody leaves 6D. Maybe Lucci was seeing the old woman giving up all hopes. Her granddaughter was gone. Lucci wanted to tap the glass now and explain Sonny wasn't lost, not yet. But such a thing would be impossible to explain. For starters, Sonny's grandmother didn't speak English, and Lucci couldn't speak Cantonese. The only solution to the grandmother's grief would be to bring her granddaughter back safe, and that's exactly what Lucci Garner planned to do. She climbed again. As she scurried from the 5th floor to the 6th, she figured her first problem would be how to get the kitchen window of 6D open from the outside. But if the Kroon could do it to her, then she could return the favor. No problem. As Lucci reached the 6th floor, she felt fired up. She felt sure. She was so prepared to find 6D's window. She wasn't prepared to find 6D's window already open, and one of the Kroons standing right inside. It was a man. He grunted, almost seemed to bark like an angry dog as soon as Lucci appeared before him. She saw him in silhouette as the sunlight filtered through the apartment. He was thin and tall, and his head had a funny shape. The top left side of his head seemed to be missing, but a second later, she realized it was just caved in, and half his skull was just gone. It was like a pit. He was standing there as if he'd been looking out at the neighborhood, and she happened to stumble into his view. Her shock acted like a spray of cold water on her face. She shivered and froze, but the man in the window didn't. The man grabbed the front of her sweater and pulled her inside. Her chin scraped the windowsill, but she was too shocked to feel the pain. She was inside, and he held her up with 2 hands, and she didn't know what to do. His hands were under her armpit. She weighed 73 pounds, but he held her like she was a puppy. Before she could do anything, he yanked at her sneakers. He pulled off the right one, then the left. The sneakers thumped to the floor. He held her up with one hand now, and the other hand dug into her pockets. He grabbed her belt buckle and tugged at it. Then the belt came off. He dropped her to the floor too. What was he going to do to her? A new fear, a deeper fear, thundered in her belly, her thighs, and she wiped her body like a feral cat. She hissed and she spat, and finally the man seemed to be having trouble keeping a hold of her. She bucked and swung her arms wildly, and finally broke free from the man's grip. She dropped to the dirty floor just like her sneakers and belt. She scrambled back into the kitchen. The floor was filthy. Bits of paper, newspaper, torn envelopes, old tissue, toilet paper, bottle caps, old soda cans, straw and candy wrappers, dirt and the husk of dead roaches, crumbly opaque roach eggs. The room smelled terrible, like parts of Flushing Meadow Park where the boys pissed when they couldn't get bothered to use the bathroom. A smell that made her nose sting. Her palms felt bitten when they came down against the edges of the bottle, the ridges of the bottle. Soda cans rattled as her flailing legs kicked them away. She looked up at the man who pulled her in. For the first time in her life, Lucci thought she might faint. The feeling was so new to her that she didn't even understand what was happening. Her head felt like it was filled with bees. Her chest and her lungs were getting tighter. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. To see this man, this thing above her, it wasn't even like the one she'd seen through the security gate in the kitchen. At least then there'd be a window, a gate between them. Now they were both in the same room. Nothing between her and him. Between her and Pitt. He tried to get Lewis in the stairwell 2 decades earlier, and now here he was coming for her. Nothing could deter him. But then he stopped for a moment, as if he thought of catching Lucci had been interrupted by another, more powerful urge. He stood still and stared at the ground, like he was looking for something he dropped in a moment. It was as if Lucci wasn't even there. Then the impulse seemed to pass, and he looked up, focused on Lucci again, coming for her. But he wasn't the only one. Pitt lumbered towards her, moving across the bombed-out kitchen, and then Lucci heard a second round of grunting, and another figure rushed out the room to her right, the one that corresponded to her mother's bedroom. It barreled out and smashed right into Pitt, sending both to the floor. It was another male. The pair yelped and growled at each other as if they'd lost the power of human speech long ago. The Kroon snapped at each other in a tussle. The new male slammed Pitt's head against the floor. Pitt raised his head immediately and bit the other one's shoulder. It screeched as Pitt bit a second time. Lucci gasped at the ferocity of their fighting. Both of them looked at Lucci quickly and then attacked each other again. They were fighting over her. She didn't want to still be there on the floor when one of them won. The room felt like some nightmare version of her place. The layout of the kitchen was the same as hers. The oven went against the wall adjacent to the window. The fridge against the wall behind her. The same space where the cabinets ran along the wall beside the fridge, identical. But the oven was gone. A gas hose ran out from the wall, but was attached to nothing. The fridge was still there, but its doors had been torn off, and the racks inside gone too. Garbage bags were piled inside. They dripped with sour yellow liquid that gave off a smell of rotten milk or meat, the worst odor in this place yet. The kitchen cabinets were there, but all the drawers had come out long ago, and the remaining cabinets hung at odd angles. It was like her place, but not her place. A nightmare version, and she wanted to escape. She could just go right out the kitchen window, she thought, climb out onto the fire escape and make her way back down to her place, be back inside and leave the Kroons behind and never think of them again. But what would happen to Sonny if she did? That was the terrible part. Of course Sonny would be abandoned, left to whatever fate the Kroons had in store for her. Maybe Lewis was right, and they would burn her body. Maybe she'd be alive when they did it. But he urged her to flee, but her urge to flee was even stronger than her concern. Just get away. That's what she was screaming in her head. Excuse me, my mouth dry. Just get away. That's what was screaming in her head. It was cowardly to consider her convincing herself and sacrificing her best friend. But consider it, Lucci did. And she might even have done it too, if the other two males weren't in a heap right before the window, the kitchen window. They screeched and gnashed at each other. Lucci had no choice but to make a different move. If this place was really laid out like her apartment, then the room to her right would be the same as her mother's bedroom. No exit in there, only windows that offer a 6-story drop. She had to cut left. First thing she see was the bathroom, but there was no point in hiding in there. If these things could bash each other with such force, they could surely smash through the bathroom door. Next, there would be a room just like her bedroom, but that also offered no escape. She would have to go into the living room, and from there, she could at least try the front door. Maybe Lewis was wrong about how it had been boarded up or how securely maybe she could get it open. Or, her second choice, she could try to climb out the window in the living room. The building's air conditioner ran a long straight line down each floor. They came pre-installed, not sitting in the window, but actually embedded into the walls. They looked like a series of pegs sticking out the front of the building. As insane as it seemed, she might sneak out the window and make her way down from one to the next. It would be like climbing a wall in gym class. Even if she only made it down one floor, she can break through the window to Sonny's apartment and get in. Those were her only choices. A scary plan, but at least it was a plan. First, she had to leave this damn kitchen. Lucci felt the dirt and garbage on the floor through her socks. She worried about stepping on broken glass. But forget about getting her sneakers again. The Kroons were fighting right beside them, and she wasn't going to risk getting any closer. That girl ran. She fled the kitchen and past the bathroom. The door was shut, and she didn't bother to try to open it. Lucci slowed in front of the second bedroom, her bedroom. The door here was dirty and hung only by the bottom hinge. The door was shut. The room was dark, but from inside, Lucci heard the flapping of wings. Dozens of small wings. Or it could be hundreds, as if all the pigeons in Queen had come to this apartment, to that decrepit room to roost. At least she hoped there were pigeons in there. She couldn't see, but if she had any thoughts of hiding out in that room, she let them go. She ran down the little walkway and into the living room. She heard a crackling sound. It was wood splintering. The living room wall was coming apart. Small pieces of it splintered. Something bashing at it from the other side. Grunting sound came through the wall and a terrible crash. A piece of the living room wall shattered. A hole appeared. She could see in the kitchen. Pitt was on the other side. He peered through the hole, which was the size of a pizza pie. He scanned for Lucci. When he saw her, he jerked his head backward and his face disappeared from the hole. He was coming around after her. Lucci sprinted through the living room. She was looking for the front door, but the faster she ran, the more distance she needed to cover. She was in her stocking feet, but the floor felt cool and wet. Lucci looked down. She was standing in grass. She looked around, trying to get her bearings. She was in a park. She looked back confused. She was standing in a field of patchy grass. She saw trees in the distance. She looked up, and instead of a ceiling, she saw an overcast gray sky. Behind the cloud cover, there was a hazy sun, color of phlegm. She was in a park. But to make it even more confusing, she could still see the living room wall that Pitt had smashed through. Although that hole she could still see the horrible kitchen, she was in the park, inside 6D. Her hands trembled and her chest clutched up again. She didn't understand. How could this be? It couldn't. From where she stood, She could see the hallway, and she just run through. Pitt came rushing out a second later. He shot straight towards her. He, too, was running through the grass. Seeing him in the half-dead grass made her believe what she was seeing more. If he was in the kitchen, then she really was too. He came straight at her, and he picked up speed. If he reached her, he would tear the skin right off her bones, just like he snatched the sneakers off her feet. She had to move, but where? The only choice seemed to be go deeper into this impossible place. A line of trees was visible to the north. There was nowhere else she might hope to hide. She took off that direction, and Lucci was fast. The fear helped her speed up. As she moved towards the trees, she was filled with a sense of familiarity. Just as she'd recognized the layout of the kitchen, she felt she knew this park intimately too. But how? Exactly, she couldn't say. Pitt tore across the field in a frenzy, so rapid that when he hit the little dip in the ground, he tumbled over and sprawled out in the grass. Lucci heard him making some kind of new call, high-pitched squeal that sounded like a toddler having a tantrum. Pitt fell into the grass, and Lucci kept moving. She reached the trees and disappeared among them. Excuse me. Chapter 6. The trees ran in two perpendicular lines for 200 feet, cutting the meadow in half. As soon as Lucci entered the cover of the trees, she made a sharp left rather than coming out the other side of the rows. She ran between them. She had the idea that she could trick Pitt, lose him, if she did this. She doubted a man, a thing, with only half a skull had more than half a brain. Once he was up again, he might keep running straight through the trees and go out the next meadow on the other side. Meanwhile, she would be doubling back toward the open kitchen window. She couldn't run so well. The roots of the trees were overgrown and thick, and they threatened to trip her. And there were little stones everywhere, cutting into her soles. Her socks weren't much protection. Her feet hurt, but she didn't slow down. She tried not to breathe too loudly, even though her chest burned from her effort. Finally, she had to stop. She had to catch her breath. She lay down on her back, heaving with one hand over her nose and mouth to mute the sound. In her own ears, her every breath was loud as a broken muffler. Out there in the meadow, she heard the Kroon's high-pitched squealing. Then it seemed to echo, playing once, then again and again. As her breath returned to normal, she realized those weren't echoes. They were replies. Lucci sat up to check her aching feet. They throbbed like she'd been cut, but they seemed okay. She watched all the yellow blades of grass in the meadow. Every few seconds they swayed. There was a breeze. Coming from where? The high-pitched squeals came again. Lucci wanted to get up, but found herself paralyzed. Her knees and elbows had locked in from the fright. Hadn't she been trying on wigs in her mother's bedroom an hour ago? They already seemed a lifetime ago. She must be dreaming. None of this made a lick of sense. Yet, somehow, she knew she wasn't. The rough ground beneath her, the squeals of the croons, the pain in her feet, all of it too real for a dream. She was awake. And that meant all of this was truly happening. If she was to survive, she couldn't stay still hoping to wake up. She straightened her mother's wig to steady herself. Lucci got to her feet. She needed to get a better idea of what was happening out there. A strategic view. She would have to climb one of the trees. She was trembling again. She was used to climbing fire escapes, but had never scaled a tree. It didn't help that this was an intense tree, an insane tree in an insane woods in an insane park that had appeared insanely in this apartment. The trees weren't all like the ones she'd been on trips to the Queen's Botanical Garden or Flushing Meadow Park. These trees were like demented cousins. They were so tall they seemed to run as high as her entire apartment building. 60 feet straight up, that big. Their trunks were misshapen, bubbling out here and there in thick knots, and their outer bark was gray and ashen, as if burned. In the places, the bark showed great tears, and the inner bark was sickly white, the color of bones. She didn't want to climb this tree. She didn't even want to touch it. But then she heard the calls out in the meadow once again, and she had no choice. She reached for the lowest branch of the nearest tree and climbed. It's amazing what a person can do when their life depends on it. Lucci scaled that tree from one limb to the next, fearful but quick. Running had been bad without sneakers, but climbing was easier in socks. She was 20 feet up before she looked down. The sight made her dizzy, but she shut her eyes and soon was calm. Then scooted the foot forward on a limb, going further and further until she was able to peek out at the meadow through the tree's dense leaves. There were 5 Kroons out there now, 75 feet away. Pitt, Lefty, and 3 more. 2 of the new ones looked exactly alike, twins. And the last one was low to the ground, as if he was lying on his stomach in the grass. Lucci watched that one. He was pulling himself through the grass. He reached forward and dug his fingers into the dirt and moved ahead a couple of inches. Then with the other hand, he'd pull himself again, back and forth like this, slow but unceasing. He was missing both his legs, but his ratty jeans were full length, and empty denim trailed behind his upper body, as if he had 2 tails. Pitt pointed to the trees. He barked at the others loudly, and they made barks back in quieter tones. They were communicating, coordinating. They spread out and formed a line, 50 feet between each of them. Together they moved towards the woods. The formation would act like a net. One of them sure would catch sight or sound or smell of her. Did Sonny come through here too? Lucci wondered. How had she avoided these things? She couldn't imagine Sonny sprinting away, let alone climbing a tree, not as sick as she was. Maybe Lucci was too late. Maybe the Kroons had already taken up her tiny body and what? Burned it? Cooked it? Her best friend going up in a cloud of smoke. The thought seemed to tickle the back of her ear, like a fly or something. You're too late. Sonny's gone. But she brushed the words away. She didn't want to hear them. She surveyed the park. Lucci's sense of familiarity returned. From a perch in the tree, she could see more of the grounds. In the distance, far behind the Kroons, she made out a body of water. It looked like a huge lake, but something was off. From here, she could see the surface flickering. The lake was on fire, or maybe it was a lake of fire. And yet, the shape of it, the distance. The distance from this stand of trees were recognizable. Meadow Lake, Flushing Meadow Park. She was in Flushing Meadow Park, where she and Sonny used to skate around the Unisphere. The Kroons were creeping nearer. Then all 5 of them stopped looking towards the trees and snapped their attentions to the ground. They looked at the half-dead grass as if they'd all dropped something important, just like Pitt had done in the kitchen earlier. They scanned the ground desperately. She wondered what each of them could have been searching for, yearning for so badly. What had Lewis called them, crackheads? Maybe they walked around and searched for crack in the ground. Lucci entertained a thought. Maybe she could just climb down and talk with them, explain that she wasn't meant to be there. She was looking for a friend, and they only wanted to go home. But that would have been as futile as trying to convince Priya, Susan, and Monique that they should let her back into their friend circle. It would never happen. The Kroon in the grass stopped altogether. His arms were straight and his spine curled back and his head lifted. He was no longer scanning the ground for cracks. He spotted her. He was looking directly at her. He watched her for a moment, his eyes like ember. She shook her head faintly as if begging him not to tell the others. His eyes narrowed and he grinned. The Kroon opened his mouth and barked. The other four, his brothers, changed direction. They swelled towards her. Lucci scrambled back along the tree limb toward the trunk. The leaves hid her, but it didn't matter. They seen where she was. She climbed down, practically jumping from one limb to the next. If this place did somehow have the same layout as Flushing Meadow Park, then she knew exactly where she might find Sonny, if Sonny is still alive. She had the thought and sent it away just as fast. If this place had the same layout, she might find Sonny at their favorite place, the giant replica of the planet built for the 1964 World Fair, probably the most famous landmark in Queens, the Unisphere. Lucci lost her footing 10 feet from the ground and fell. The drop seemed to take days, but eventually she slammed into the earth. She landed on her side, banging her hip and shoulder. She couldn't keep her eyes focused, but she still scrambled to her feet because she could hear the Kroons rushing towards her in the grass. The brittle blades cracked. It sounded like the metal was on fire. Lucci ran from them. Through the second row of trees, she didn't think about her feet, shoulder, or hip. Her only thought was to find the Unisphere. She entered a second meadow of half-dead grass. Without meaning to, she let out a sharp laugh. In the distance, she saw a giant silver globe. All right, we'll stop there. And we'll pick up next week. Family. Oh, man. Okay, let me see. All right. I appreciate your time as always. I hope you have a fantastic weekend. And I hope we get to see you here again on Tuesday, where we continue our discussion of generational curses. And if you can't make it Tuesday to join our discussion of generational curses, I hope to see you back here Thursday for another book club as we continue to read Lucretia and the Kroons. Again, I appreciate you. Much gratitude, family. Peace.